Two thugs boarded the bus and headed straight for an elderly black man, hurling insults and demanding that he give up his seat. Fozed, the old man abruptly slapped one of them across the face, catching them off guard and fueling their anger. Just as they prepared to retaliate, a bearded man suddenly stepped in. Stepping in, he halted their aggression and firmly rebuked them for their disrespect. After delivering his warning, the bearded man calmly took a seat in front, but his words only fueled their fury. Convinced that the elderly man was weak and easy to overpower, the thugs brazenly taunted him, daring him to fight. He swiftly took them both down with just a few decisive punches. His name was Frank, a Vietnam War veteran who never expected his life to take such an unexpected turn. After returning from the battlefield, his world seemed frozen in place for decades. But now, everything was on the brink of a remarkable transformation. Raised in a humble family, Frank spent his childhood working alongside his parents on a small farm in California. Though their life was modest, he never let hardship dampen his spirit. On the contrary, that simple life instilled in him a deep appreciation for life's small joys, especially his love for Lindsay, the girl he had always dreamed of marrying. But their bright future was abruptly put on hold when the Vietnam War broke out. Before leaving, Frank promised Lindsay he would return soon, but the war dragged on far longer than anyone had expected. For 7 grueling years in a foreign land, Frank endured relentless hardships, including being captured and held as a prisoner of war. He suffered brutal torture and endless interrogations, yet his unwavering resilience kept him alive until he was finally freed. A severe injury ultimately forced him to return home, but he carried with him the haunting scars of war. The moment he was discharged from the hospital, Frank went straight to his girlfriend's house, longing for a long-awaited reunion. To his shock, he discovered that Lindsay had married someone else. Heartbroken, Frank channeled his pain into building a new future. Determined to put his skills to use, he applied to the police academy, believing his combat experience would give him an edge. However, his severe injuries led to his rejection. Undeterred, he refused to give up and continued searching for new opportunities. Without a higher education, Frank faced constant rejection wherever he applied. The word "sorry, the position has already been filled" became so familiar that he gradually lost all hope. With no other options, he was forced to find his own way to survive. No one could have predicted that a war veteran like him would spend the next 40 years making a living by selling sausages on the street. However, fate had other plans. One day, during his usual bus ride, Frank found himself in the middle of an unexpected confrontation. 2 bald men boarded the bus and began harassing an elderly black passenger. When they raised their fists, ready to strike, Frank instinctively stepped in. Initially, he only meant to warn them, hoping to avoid conflict, but the thugs were itching for a fight. Unable to stand their arrogance any longer, Frank took action and swiftly put them in their place. As the dust settled, the other passengers erupted into applause, recognizing his bravery. What Frank never anticipated was that a passenger had recorded the entire incident, and the video quickly went viral. Overnight, he became an internet sensation. The man who had lived in obscurity for decades was now affectionately dubbed the cool guy. His face appeared everywhere on graffiti walls, t-shirts, and social media feeds. Even the police, instead of treating him like a troublemaker, escorted him home with a friendly demeanor, as if welcoming an old friend. Reporters rushed to secure an interview with the unexpected social media star who had taken the internet by storm. But for Frank, the most meaningful reward was the pride shining in his mother's eyes. However, his moment of happiness was short-lived. His mother soon passed away, leaving him with a large house and her beloved dog as her final gift. With her gone, the only family Frank had left was his loyal friend Klondike, a fellow veteran who had stood by his side through life's hardest battles. With Klondike's support, Frank slowly adjusted to life in his new home. The two spent countless evenings together, reminiscing about their days in the military. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Klondike couldn't hold back his tears as he spoke from the heart. "Thank you for taking care of me and giving me a home. You're the only family I have left, and you saved my life. I owe you everything." They shared their dreams, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. As time passed, their lives began to improve, especially when Frank, to his surprise, found himself becoming a local celebrity. One day, Klondike handed Frank a mysterious flash drive, asking him to store it in the safe. It was the first time Frank had ever seen the device. Shortly after, Klondike stepped out to buy cigarettes, leaving Frank alone at home. As fate would have it, he crossed paths with two thugs who immediately demanded the flash drive. Feigning ignorance, Klondike acted as if he had no idea what they were talking about. But before he could react further, one of them raised a gun to his head. Staying calm under pressure, Klondike sprang into action, swiftly taking them both down. However, just as he turned to walk away, a gunshot rang out. Klondike collapsed, his life cut short in an instant. The police summoned Frank to identify the body. Overwhelmed with grief at the loss of his best friend, he demanded justice, urging the authorities to hunt down those responsible. After leaving the station, he stepped outside to collect himself, taking a sip of water as he tried to process everything. Just then he ran into his neighbor, who offered heartfelt condolences and shared in his sorrow. As they talked, she revealed something that left Frank stunned. Her brother had also been murdered near the very spot where Klondike had met his tragic end. The woman voiced her frustration, saying that the local police had done little to solve serious cases like this. Uneasy, Frank confided in a law enforcement acquaintance, who reassured him that the police were working hard to track down the culprit. However, not long after, while watching the news, Frank was hit with another shock. A young white boy had been murdered in town. What stood out was that the suspect in this case was arrested almost immediately, leaving Frank with a deep sense of injustice and doubt about the police's priorities. The next day, unable to contain his frustration, he went to the police station to demand answers about Klondike's case. Yet again he was met with the same familiar response. The officers insisted they were working tirelessly. "We're doing the best we can." But that vague reassurance did little to ease Frank's growing impatience. At last, Frank realized he couldn't rely solely on the police. Determined to uncover the truth himself, he set out to the crime scene, hoping to find clues others had missed. There, he discovered three crucial pieces of evidence: a spent bullet, a necklace, and a pendant shaped like a girl. Sensing that these could be the key to solving the mystery, he decided to start with the bullet. Wasting no time, Frank headed to the only gun store in town, determined to identify the type of firearm that had fired the bullet. He knew that tracing its origin could bring him one step closer to the killer. The store's advisor examined the bullet and explained that it was used exclusively in specialized weapons, typically issued to the military or Secret Service. He further confirmed that his store didn't carry any such firearms, leaving Frank with more questions than answers. As soon as the shopkeeper spotted the necklace Frank had found, his expression changed. He immediately recognized the image of the girl on it and revealed that she was the wife of a man named Terrence, who lived just a few blocks away. Without hesitation, he gave Frank directions to Terrence's house. When Frank arrived, the door was opened by a weary young woman cradling a child. As they spoke, Frank learned that Terrence had been absent for a long time, leaving his wife to care for their three children alone. With a heavy heart, she admitted that she hadn't seen or heard from him in weeks. The children's cries filled the house as they kept asking for their father. With a heavy sigh, the woman finally revealed that a friend had recently spotted Terrence at a nearby basketball court. She suggested that Frank try looking for him there. Wasting no time, Frank set off for the court. Upon arrival, he started asking around, hoping to track down Terrence's whereabouts. At first, the people at the basketball court were reluctant to share any information. However, when Frank took a firmer, more assertive approach, they finally relented. They mentioned a man named Ronaldo who might have some answers, and provided Frank with an address nearby. Without hesitation, Frank made his way to the location. Upon arrival, he was met by a stranger dressed as a priest. But before he could make sense of the situation, one of Ronaldo's neighbors suddenly mistook him for a thief and raised the alarm, creating an unexpected and tense moment. Once the misunderstanding was settled, the neighbor finally provided Frank with a valuable lead. Ronaldo was a regular at a nearby bar every morning. They even gave him the exact address. The next morning, Frank set out for the bar, determined to find Ronaldo. However, upon returning home, he encountered an emotional scene unfolding right outside his house. A young couple was locked in a heated argument, their voices rising with frustration. Suddenly, the man stormed off in anger, leaving his wife Amber and their son Martin standing in sorrowful silence as they watched him walk away. Frank invited the woman into his home to tend to the bruises on her face, inflicted by her abusive husband. After treating her wounds, the three of them, Frank, Amber, and Martin, shared a warm conversation, finding comfort in each other's presence. For the first time in a while, the evening felt peaceful. The next morning, Frank resumed his search for Ronaldo at the bar. As soon as he stepped onto the first floor, he was immediately recognized by the crowd, and their reactions were anything but welcoming. Sensing hostility, Frank didn't hesitate. He swiftly used his combat skills to push through the aggressive onlookers. Eventually, he made his way to the second floor, where Ronaldo was waiting. When Frank questioned Ronaldo about Terrence, the man pulled out a knife and defiantly declared that he wouldn't say a word. But after a swift and forceful move from Frank sent him tumbling out the window, Ronaldo quickly changed his tune. Fearing for his life, he surrendered and revealed that Terrence had recently been seen with a woman who worked at a nearby massage parlor. Satisfied with the lead, Frank decided to head home. However, on his way back, he unexpectedly ran into his police friend. With a concerned look, the officer warned him that word of his investigation had spread throughout the city. Even the chief of police had nearly ordered his arrest. Thanks to the timely intervention of a few officers, Frank narrowly avoided arrest. However, when confronted, he made his stance clear. He couldn't just stand by while the police turned a blind eye to his best friend's murder. The officers, growing frustrated, warned him that this wasn't his concern, and that if he continued interfering, they would no longer have his back. But Frank remained unwavering. He met their gaze and firmly replied, "I don't need your help." As soon as Frank stepped inside, he was met with a shocking sight. His home had been completely ransacked. Before he could take a closer look, a towering man suddenly grabbed him from behind, his grip tight and threatening. The intruder demanded the flash drive, but Frank feigned ignorance, acting as though he had no idea what the man was talking about. Then, in a split second, Frank sprang into action. With precise, calculated force, he overpowered the attacker and sent him crashing through the window, landing hard on the ground below. Frank then sought out his neighbor, Martin, hoping he could help unlock the secrets hidden in the flash drive Klondike had entrusted to him. As they examined the contents, they found a town map, several building permits, and a contact list. At first, none of it made sense. Why would Klondike be involved with these documents? But then Frank's eyes landed on a peculiar alias, Black Panther. In that instant, a long-buried memory resurfaced, sending a chill down his spine. Frank made his way to the Asian massage parlor Ronaldo had mentioned and arranged a meeting with Tatiana. When she learned of his request, she seemed taken aback and immediately asked why he wanted to see her. Frank explained that he was searching for Terrence. Tatiana's demeanor shifted. She grew visibly uneasy. Rather than answering his questions, she hurried off after her shift ended. Sensing she was hiding something, Frank followed her home, hoping to uncover more clues. When he arrived, he decided to climb through the window to take a look inside. However, just as he was about to slip in, a neighbor caught sight of him. At first, the neighbor was skeptical of Frank's claim that he was Tatiana's boyfriend. Eyeing him suspiciously, he asked Frank to step closer for verification, but the moment he recognized Frank as the cool guy from TV, his demeanor shifted completely. "I'm a huge fan of yours," he exclaimed excitedly. Not only did he let Frank off the hook, but he also casually mentioned that Tatiana's back door happened to be unlocked, offering an unspoken invitation for Frank to continue his search. Frank slipped into the house unnoticed and crept upstairs. To his shock, he found Tatiana and Terrence lying in bed together. Before he could react, Terrence grabbed a gun and fired, but Frank was quicker, dodging the shot and knocking him down. Seizing the moment, Frank dragged Terrence into the kitchen, where he forced his hand into the garbage disposal. Terrence thrashed in agony, his screams echoing through the house. Unable to withstand the pain any longer, he finally broke. Through gritted teeth, he confessed that Klondike had been murdered by his associate Sebastian. But the most chilling revelation was yet to come. They were both merely following orders from someone even more powerful. At first, Terrence stubbornly refused to reveal who was pulling the strings, but after relentless interrogation, he finally cracked, uttering a single name: Black Panther, along with the person's location. Returning home, Frank once again stumbled upon the neighbor couple in the middle of a heated argument. This time, however, the husband was more aggressive than ever. Unable to stand by, Frank stepped in, firmly ordering him to leave Amber alone. Fueled by anger and jealousy, the husband lashed out, accusing his wife of having an affair with Frank. Frank swiftly restrained the husband, twisting his arm before forcefully kicking him out of the house. Amber, relieved and grateful, embraced Frank and noticed the exhaustion on his face. Concerned, she suggested he take a break and later join her for dinner, mentioning that her son Martin would be staying at a friend's house for the night. Although time was short, Frank couldn't suppress his excitement. He spent the afternoon preparing meticulously, selecting his sharpest suit and carefully choosing a bouquet of fresh flowers, a small yet thoughtful gesture for the evening ahead. Amber couldn't take her eyes off Frank, captivated by how sharp and confident he looked in his suit. They dined under the soft glow of garden lights, surrounded by the gentle fragrance of blooming flowers, creating an intimate and romantic atmosphere. Frank seemed satisfied with the meal he had prepared, but Amber, smiling warmly, admitted she was grateful for the chance to cook for someone who truly appreciated it. As the evening deepened, she opened up to him, confessing that the man she had married was once kind and loving, but over time, he had changed beyond recognition, becoming someone she could no longer love. As they soaked in the peaceful ambiance, their conversation grew more intimate, bringing them closer. Just as they were about to share their first kiss, an unexpected interruption broke the moment. Martin arrived home early after his friend got into trouble, leading to the cancellation of their sleepover plans. Though their romantic moment was cut short, Frank and Amber didn't let it dampen their spirits. Instead, they enjoyed a warm, laughter-filled evening with Martin. As the night wound down, Frank suggested that Amber and her son stay at his place, knowing their front door was still in need of repair. Determined to take the next step, Frank met with his trusted police friend and handed over the flash drive. He explained that its contents were directly tied to Klondike's death and, in a solemn tone, asked his friend to look after his dog if anything happened to him. With the weight of his decision pressing down on him, Frank then made his way to the church. Seeking solace, he approached a priest for confession. His expression was grave as he admitted that he was about to commit an irreversible act, one he knew would leave no path for redemption. That night, Frank arrived at the warehouse Terrence had mentioned. The guards at the entrance immediately blocked his way, refusing to let him through. But as soon as Panther, the leader, recognized Frank's voice, he emerged from the shadows, his cold, calculating eyes locking onto him. Without hesitation, Panther made his intentions clear. Klondike had paid the ultimate price for daring to steal something of great value from him. His tone was sharp and unwavering as he issued a demand. Frank was to hand over the flash drive immediately. When Frank feigned ignorance about the flash drive, the thugs wasted no time restraining him, strapping him into an electric chair. But fear no longer held power over him. He had endured pain far worse before, and those trials had only hardened his resolve. No matter how much they pushed, Frank remained silent, refusing to break. His unwavering defiance only fueled Panther's frustration. Losing patience, the crime boss ordered his men to continue their brutal methods and turned to leave. But before disappearing into the shadows, he delivered one final blow. He knew about Amber, the woman Frank cared for, and now she would suffer the consequences of Frank's choices. Panther had underestimated Frank's foresight. Hidden in his pocket was a matchbox, and with it a daring plan. Suddenly, a powerful explosion rocked the warehouse, sending shockwaves through the air and throwing the guards into chaos. Amidst the smoke and confusion, Frank seized his chance, breaking free from his restraints. Without hesitation, he lunged at Panther, cutting off his escape. His car now lay in ruins from the blast. The two men collided in a brutal showdown, fists flying with relentless force. As the fight raged on, Panther's eyes flicked to a weapon lying on the floor. Desperation flashed across his face as he reached for it, determined to turn the tide in his favor. Panther wasted no time. He hijacked a bus, shoved the driver out, and sped off in a desperate escape. Frank sprang into action, spotting another bus nearby. The driver, recognizing him, hesitated but ultimately surrendered the wheel. The high-speed chase tore through the streets, engines roaring as Frank closed in on his target. Panther, however, was cunning, expertly maneuvering to slip past every trap. All the while he taunted Frank, mocking his efforts and claiming he would never catch him. But Frank refused to back down. With one bold, calculated move, he swerved sharply and rammed his bus into Panther's, sending it careening off balance. The impact was devastating. Panther's vehicle flipped violently, crashing to a grinding halt. Panther's vehicle slammed into an oncoming train, the impact sending debris flying. Miraculously, both he and Frank survived, but Panther didn't waste a second. He scrambled to his feet and took off running. Despite his injuries and a noticeable limp, Frank refused to let him escape. He pushed forward, determined to end things once and for all. Along the way, he crossed paths with a group of bald-headed men, former adversaries, whom he had unwittingly turned into an online sensation. They resented him for making them a laughingstock, and had been waiting for the perfect moment to get their revenge. Convinced that this was their chance, they planned to record a new video, one where they would finally come out on top. But their overconfidence proved to be their downfall. Panther had broken into the house, cornering Amber with a knife. But before he could strike, the door burst open. Frank stormed in and slammed him hard against the wall. The fight erupted with brutal intensity, spilling outside onto the street. Panther gained the upper hand, knocking Frank to the ground and preparing to land a devastating blow. But before he could, Amber sprang into action, leaping onto his back in a desperate back-in to stop him. The distraction was all Frank needed. He pushed himself up and launched a final, crushing attack, bringing Panther down for good. As the fight ended, the gathered neighbors erupted into applause, awed by Frank's victory. Amber stepped forward, her gaze filled with both admiration and concern. With a soft smile, she reached out and asked, "Now, can I take care of your wounds just like you did for me?" The next day, the local news broadcast a sensational headline, "The Villain Strikes Back." But this time, Frank's battle wasn't just against the notorious skinhead gang, it was much bigger. He had uncovered one of the town's deepest corruption scandals, exposing Mayor Williams and his ties to one of the country's most dangerous criminal organizations. Frank's fearless actions didn't go unnoticed. In recognition of his bravery, he was honored with the title of Honorary Police Officer. Now, with the chaos behind him, he, Amber, and Martin are finally living a peaceful and happy life together. And that's the story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.